Hey everyone, welcome to the Echo Podcast. My name is Ryan Becker and I am your host, and I'm excited for you to meet two really good friends of mine that are joining me for this episode. The first is Nena Madrigal. Nena is a student at Southern Adventist University who has a huge passion for service and for outreach, and once she graduates, she actually plans to go full-time into mission work. She is someone whose heart for people is evident just by looking at her, just by talking with her. It is incredible how she views other people. And our second guest is Jacob Fisher. Jacob is also a student at Southern and has a passion for media ministry, has a passion. He actually works for a Christian radio station, and he's someone who is just really passionate about really building people up, encouraging them and uplifting them, and being a positive presence in the lives of those around him. And so I won't keep you from their opinions and perspectives any longer. I'm excited for you to hear from them. So welcome to Echo. Let's get started.
This episode of the Echo Podcast is sponsored by Southern Adventist University.
Joy versus happiness is an interesting dilemma that people face, and the reason being, everyone I think is chasing this, feeling good about their life, and how to minimize pain. I mean, I think the real question behind, the difference between joy and happiness or the real motivation for asking that question tends to come from a place of, how do I minimize pain in my life? Or how do I even just get rid of pain altogether? And how do I eliminate suffering from my own life? And so I'm excited to dive into this topic because I think that there's a lot here that can set some people free, and perhaps even help the three of us in any way that we're wrestling with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the best place to start as we jump into this is to one thing that I really like to do whenever we talk about very specific terms, but we need a working definition.
Absolutely.
So we need something so that when we say joy, everyone knows what we're talking about, and happiness, everyone knows what we're talking about. It's okay if the three of us have different definitions too, but what matters is everyone, they know when we're talking, what we're talking about. And so, Jacob, let me start with you. What operating definition would you give for, or what would you, joy, and then for happiness?
So I would say that joy is something that comes from a fulfillment, something that really resonates with something in your life that gives you purpose, and it's something that doesn't just last in the moment. And that's what I would shift to happiness. Happiness is something where you watch that movie or you enjoy that food and you're happy in the moment, but it's fleeting. Joy is something that persists.
Okay, cool. Nena, what about you?
I agree with what he said. That's pretty much how I think of it too, like joy. And I also think joy is something that we receive from God. Like, it's a gift that's given to us and something that we choose to have. Whereas happiness, like you said, is fleeting. It's something that is very heavily influenced by circumstance and things that are going on in our lives and things like that.
Well, and I think too with happiness, like it being fleeting can be, not that I'm like criticizing the both of you, fleeting can be seen as a negative word to a lot of people. Yeah. And I don't think fleeting is a bad thing.
No.
Like if you were happy all the time, everyone would start to hate you at some point.
Yeah.
Like
we all know those people.
Yeah, just turn it down like a little bit, right? And I think it's important for us to understand that joy is, and it's okay if someone else like has the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. What matters is that there is a difference. Mm-hmm. But the other thing with happiness, this is something I learned about laughter. Have you ever laughed so hard that it started to hurt after a while?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Especially with my buddies, and we just start going in with jokes and stories. Oh, it's so good just laugh like that hard.
Yeah, exactly. But it does hurt, like it physically hurts. So it turns out that the entire time you're laughing, it actually hurts physiologically. The only reason it doesn't is because your body is like having a major like endorphin rush and like a chemical thing happening that basically blocks the pain. So the reason it starts hurting after a while
is because that endorphin rush goes away.
Yeah, is because it ran out. Like your brain ran out, and so suddenly it hurts now.
Okay.
So
learn something new every day.
The idea being, in regards to happiness, that eventually that actually can be the thing that causes pain.
Yeah.
And eventually that happiness, whether it is because now you're annoying other people around you, or because in order to stay in that happy place, you are now starting to wall out or block out anything that might be a threat to the happiness. Whereas I think joy is something that you are confident will remain regardless of circumstances. There is, you can be in a bad mood and I think still feel joy. I can be having a terrible day, but when I sit down to record a podcast or when I sit down to play a video game I like or read a book or whatever, like I know that I can still be, getting fulfillment and that sense of fulfillment out of whatever I'm doing. And I think that's where that joy comes from, right? So what do you think are some misconceptions about joy and happiness that either society has or even specifically the church or people in the church have?
I would say one thing is, and I know because I used to be this way, is that pursuit of perfection, that you're not going to be happy or you're not going to be completely joyful or you're not going to be fulfilled unless you've hit that perfection. You go to the right, you get that right grade on that test. You go to the right college. You're impressing the right people. For the longest time, that's what I thought. I was like, okay, I got to do this, and then this is going to happen, and then I'm going to be sweet, right? This is going to be great. But lately, that's not how it's turning out. And it was a huge wake-up call. But then I turn around and I talk to somebody that was put on a right path, and I'm slowly learning that you need to roll with the punches, and that the negative stuff is going to happen, but you can't let that affect your joy if you know you're on the right path.
Yeah. If you're, I think one of the one of the dangerous things about seeking happiness is that you, or at least once you experience happiness, is that you don't want that to go away.
Yeah.
And so then you start living in fear of pain or fear of those negative things happening and accepting that they just will happen. Even just yesterday, I got a terrible phone call. Like, things just happen. I don't get to control all of the circumstances in my life. And I think as well, understanding, like, I think one of the misconceptions that people have is that emotions are a bad thing. That negative, like the more typically negative emotions are a bad thing, but there are times where God gets angry. There are times where Jesus is incredibly sad and he weeps.
Oh, yeah.
There are times where Jesus is in incredible pain for his creation and for people. There are all these times where there are what we would call the more negative emotions that are actually completely appropriate to the situation. If someone is happy during a time where you would think they're grieving, that's going to make you question something, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying you can't be happy in time of grief either, but that just seems off at first. And so there are times where being sad, being angry, being hurting, and allowing that hurt to just be is appropriate, I think. So that would be what I would add there. Nina, what about you?
Yeah, I think, which I think kind of bouncing off what you were saying, a misconception is that if we have joy and we've received this from God and everything, that like we have to be happy, like that being a Christian, like we should be happy all the time, and and all this kind of stuff. And I know, like, I felt that for a long time in my life, and it was like I would just try to ignore sadness, ignore anger, ignore all these other like emotions that I'm feeling, because like, oh well, God has given me all these great things, like what, like I can't not be happy,
Yeah.
But it's important to process through those emotions that you're having. Like, you can still have joy and not be happy. You can have joy and feel fear. You can have joy and feel anger and all these things. And I think joy is like, part of it is like knowing that like it's gonna be okay, even if it's not right now, like, and just this idea that it's okay to not be okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, that it's okay to have emotions and to experience those things, but you can still like have joy through whatever you're going through, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I think one thing I've never thought of it this way, but one thing I think that I've just kind of realized or I'm piecing together, even just through what I've heard you guys share, is that happiness tends to be determined by more external factors, whereas joy is more internally determined.
Yeah.
And that's why it doesn't get necessarily affected by external factors, right? And there's a reason why, and I'm not saying that this is like a bad thing necessarily, but there's a reason why when people find their joy in like a specific friendship or a relationship, well, if that thing goes away, then now they have lost their joy, because that joy wasn't actually internally determined, but rather it was completely dependent on the presence of someone else in your life that you can't, and you just can't control that, right? So I just want to ask you flat out, what gives you joy? What in your life is something that, or even just within you, is something that you've experienced that you say, like, yeah, this is the thing that I always feel good about, or I just know I'm confident in my own life?
I guess mine would have to be talking to people kind of like this, or making people laugh is something that I find great joy in. That's kind of why I chose the career path I'm on, because I want to communicate with people. I want to tell people stories, and I want to entertain people.
Yeah.
And I feel that, whether I'm, behind a microphone or I'm out in the street talking to somebody behind it, with a camera, I'm able to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Nena?
I think for me, like, relationships and connections and service and outreach are things that, like, really bring me joy a lot. Just something that I can always come back to, and it's just always something that will just lift me up. But I think even more than that, just like staying connected with Christ, because I think it's in John chapter 10 maybe, or 15.
Don't feel bad.
Like
I'm a pastor and I'm terrible at remembering
like
scripture.
Somewhere.
Finally, you know Greek, right?
Yeah.
It says, it's when Jesus is saying like I'll give you joy, and like it'll be made complete. And it said, like, before that, it says, like, remain in my love, and like through remaining in my love, like, your joy will be made complete. So I think, like, that's the key, is just like that connection with Christ, like staying connected to him, like, and getting that joy from him. Like I said earlier, like it's something that I think is a gift that, like, he gives to us. Like, he promises us that joy. Like, he doesn't promise that we're always gonna be happy or like everything's gonna go great, but he promises to give us joy. And so I think that for me too, like, just being consistent and like keeping that connection, because I can look back on my life and see times whenever I, like, definitely wasn't feeling joy, and like those are the moments whenever I've, like, strayed away from God, and the moments when I'm most joyful are the moments whenever I'm, like, right there with him.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for that. It's weird for me. It's this weird mix of both. And the word that I would use for myself is contribution. So I get my joy out of being able to contribute something positive to the world.
Yeah.
That's where my podcasting experience comes from. That's where, even in friendships, being able to make people laugh or being able to lighten their mood or their day, and just helping someone experience something different, or in service, right?
Yeah.
And all of that, a positive contribution is done in several different ways, and service and outreach is like a significant, like that's the entire point, is that you're making a positive contribution, not just to the world, but to someone specific's life. And so, yeah, for me, that's where is as long as I feel like I'm able to contribute something, that's when I know, that's where my joy comes from. Doesn't necessarily matter the method, but rather it's just, I'll take whatever the most readily available method is in order to carry that out. Okay, so now on the flip side, what is something recently that has made you happy? What is something even maybe you're experiencing it now? If you're not, that's totally fine. But what's something that has made you happy recently?
Well, a long time ago, when I was in middle school, high school, in that area, I was on a swim team, and I was really good at swimming. And then I got more into high school, and I stopped swimming, and I started playing soccer. But it was all right. I like that. Just this semester, I got back into swimming, and it is so much fun. That is something that I look forward to every Tuesday and Thursday, is getting in that pool for an hour and just putting a bunch of laps down. Yeah. And that's something that makes me really happy right now. And it's it's healthy. I'm exercising.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. Nena, what about you?
I think something that is making me really happy right now is just, I work with campus ministries at Southern, and this semester I have a lot more time that I'm like in the office, whereas last semester I wasn't really. And just being around like my friends all the time, and I'm a super relational person, like and I'm very much a people person, and so I'm just like this semester I'm just around people so much more than I was like last semester. And so doing that, like we have like a volleyball team, like we're just like all day I feel like I'm like with these
like
people
volleyball.
like and like yeah, I think that's been really nice recently.
Yeah, no, that both of those are really cool. For me, actually, the thing that's actually brought me happiness is volleyball intramural season at Southern is happening. Like, as you know, I have a game tonight.
Oh, is it right now?
Yeah, it's right now.
It's right
I didn't
now,
even
yeah.
know.
And volleyball is actually my favorite sport to play.
Yeah.
And it's making me happy because I've actually had, this is something not a lot of people know, but I've had really bad lower back problems the last probably 2 years. I've spent probably over $2,000 just trying to fix it, and it's still here. Yep.
Wow.
It's rough. It is debilitating. I mean, I'm talking like, as we speak, even standing for more than 10 minutes will cause my back to tighten up, and I'll feel pain the rest of the day.
Oh my God.
And luckily my physical therapist has told me that I don't have any restriction right now. It's some muscle issue, but I don't have any restriction right now. So for now I can still play volleyball. Like I have been afraid of exercising for the last year. So for a physical therapist to now tell me like, you don't need to be afraid. Plus you're coming here like every other day. So no matter what, like we can get you to a place that you can still do what you need to do.
Yeah.
So go and enjoy yourself and have fun. So for me, like, yeah, I finally get to actually have fun again in that way. Like that's huge to me. I'm super happy about that.
Yeah.
So I want to turn this now a little bit more on the practical side of things. I want to talk about someone's journey to finding what brings them joy. And maybe this can be a little bit introspective for you and sharing from our own experiences how we've arrived where we're at currently. And I do want to preface that I guess clarify or disclaimer that by saying that does not mean that we've arrived necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think the three of us, I don't think any of the three of us would claim that we are experts on this, but rather this is just like, hey, this is where we're at. And if you're someone who wants to be in a similar position, well, here's what we can share. And so I want to ask you, how did you identify or realize that the thing that brings you joy, not happiness, but joy, how did you identify that that's what it was?
You want to go? I'll let you go first this time.
Oh, sure. So then speaking specifically with like service and outreach, I think, so growing up, like I like growing up in the church and everything, and going through middle school, like I like didn't really want anything to do with the church. Like I went through like this little rebellious phase, right? And everything. And like I really like had no joy, like into middle school and like going into high school, like there were all kinds of things. Like I was struggling with depression and like all this kind of stuff where I was just like trying to find fulfillment in all different ways, like with like different friend groups and you know, all these just a lot of different things, and nothing was fulfilling me, and like and I don't think I realized that I was really missing anything, but I just knew that like life kind of sucked, and I get it. Just was kind of like, well, this is just how it is, you know. And going into my sophomore year of high school, I went on a mission trip, and you know, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, a mission trip changed my life, like, which like I totally believe it will, like but like I didn't go for like the right reasons. Like I was like, oh, I want to travel, and like you know, like it'd be cool, like you know, I never do anything fun for spring break, so I'm one of 6 kids, so like we never travel, like we never do anything. It's super expensive, like and
family.
Yeah, right. And so I was like, oh, I just want to travel and like do all these things. And my brother and I were sponsoring a kid through Compassion International, and he lived in the country we were going to. And so I was like, oh, that would be cool if we could like visit him. But it's like, and so like I went, we ended up going on the trip, me and my brother together. And like the 2 things I was looking forward to was like being able to travel and being able to like meet the kid that I sponsored, because we had arranged it so that we could like have a day where we like got to meet our kid and everything, which was super cool. But that was like the first day we were there. So then it was like I had like my really cool like day, and like we got to see we went and traveled around a little bit, and then it was like I was just like, what am I going to do the rest of the time while I'm here? Like, I don't know. Like, that was my one thing. It's on the first day. I've just like ruined it.
Now back to hauling bricks for the church.
And so then I was kind of like bummed out. But then the rest of the week went on, and it was like just this whole week of like pouring into people, you know, that I had never done before. We did projects at the school that we were staying at. We did a VBS program. We went around to different places and visited like these orphanages, and we're just like there with the people, just like pouring into them, spending time with them, and just like it was the first time in my life that I was like serving other people. And coming back from that trip, like I was just like, that completely changed my life, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Like this is it. Like this is what I love, you know? And so that was kind of like the point for me where I realized like, oh, like service and missions and things like that is like, that's what I'm passionate about. And that was what it was like for me.
Yeah.
But
came out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, literally, I was not expecting. I wasn't even looking, like, really.
That's awesome.
But, yeah.
Cool.
For me, this goes back to my senior year of high school. I was taking I was taking like the college equivalent of like general chemistry. I was working for the science teacher then at Georgia Cumberland Academy. I don't know if you know where that is.
Yeah.
And at that time I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to major in chemistry. I want to get my PhD, and I want to teach, right? So first year of college rolls around, and it's fine. I took chemistry already, general chemistry, so I'm taking other classes. I'm actually tutoring chemistry at this point. Everything's fine. Sophomore year comes, and I'm taking organic chemistry and quantitative analysis. And I hated quantitative analysis.
I was waiting for you to say organic chemistry.
That
was not what I was expecting.
No, organic chemistry was actually good because the professors in both sections that I took one was my advisor. He was super cool. And the other one was just another really great teacher.
Gotcha.
And that's what killed it for quantitative analysis was the professor. I'm not going to name any names, but he was so dry and unapproachable, and just really made it the pits for me to be in that class. And that's when I realized I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I dropped that class, and I was like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? I had this plan. Now that's gone. So now I'm lost. So I sat down with my mom, and we had just a super long conversation about what makes me happy, what made her happy, what were the signs that she saw that drove her to do what she was doing now. And I sat down and I thought, and I said, I really like making people laugh. I really like talking to people. I really like creating things, which is super weird, going from a super analytic science math based thing into something super creative. But it was just that 180 I think that I needed, and that conversation with my mom that really pushed me to where I am today, because now I'm in a place where I'm doing things that I love, stuff like this. I never would have met Rachel, and who texted me to come onto this. I never would have met people in my class that I'm lifelong friends with now. I never would have met professors in the communication department that are now lifelong mentors to me now. And I mean, I think the key point from that story is that talking with someone who knows what they have and is joyful in their own life, and being able to accept that advice and run with it yourself is super important to have that. So it's super important to have that person to talk to in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's huge. And I think one of the common things that I'm hearing from both of you here is also the idea of having a kind of wide array of experiences, even being willing to do things that at first may not seem like something you're interested in, and even if it is going for the wrong reason. I can't think of how many because it's countless. But how many friends have like done something because they've been chasing after a girl or a guy, and then they end up falling in love with the thing that they did trying to chase the person instead of falling in love with a person. And it just like sometimes even doing something for the wrong reason, not that I want to encourage that, but can be how you identify it. But the reality is, if we limit what we're kind of open to experiencing, we limit the opportunities to discover a passion or something that we love. Like for me, podcasting is something that I never would have thought I liked. Yeah. And even when I started it, I felt I did it more kind of out of obligation than a felt obligation in my own heart, but still an obligation. Like I wasn't in love with the medium yet. And then as I was producing episodes and my show was growing, I was like, oh no, I actually love this. Like, I spent all my time researching equipment and learning about the actual medium of podcasting, and it's something that just kind of happened to me. But it's not even something I discovered until 2 years after I graduated from college. And it's not even something that's, the content is directly related to what I graduated with, which was theology. But ultimately, like, podcasting itself is not at all connected to pastoring directly. Yeah. So it can come when you least expect it, and you can find it really by opening yourself up to having more experiences, whether that's taking more trips, or meeting new people, or taking a weird class, or talking with an advisor or professor, and just hearing from other people's stories and journeys. I think one of my favorite things that podcasting has done is allowed us to hear more in depth other people's stories and get to know people just through what they share on a podcast. Like that's awesome. Yeah. You can get to know a lot about me just by listening to the content that I've put out, and same with my guests. So it's really cool to see. So I do want to kind of, as we wrap up, and I think you've hit one on the head there too. Is there anything that you would say on a practical level that you would encourage people to do as they're finding joy or experiencing joy, whether it's how to find it, maintain it, or get it back? Yeah. Is there anything that you would encourage someone with?
Definitely, I would say take an analysis of your everyday routine. If you're, at my point in life, you're in college, you're just entering college. Take stock of what you're doing, and if you're already thinking about what you want to do, and ask yourself if you find yourself dreading going to these classes. Do you find yourself dreading meeting these people in your life? And if you are, take a hard look at what you want. Take a hard look at what you think you want. Think about it. Pray about it. Talk with people who have things that they want and are joyful. You can tell that they are joyful in life. And don't be afraid to do a 180 if it calls for it.
Yeah. Being able to just completely flip everything around because you've discovered a new love. Like that happens for real. Yeah. Nina, what about you?
Well, I absolutely agree with what Jacob said. I think too, just being intentional about praying for joy. Like, prayer is like a super huge thing for me. And just like asking God to sustain your joy, or to help you find it, or whatever that looks like, and like praying intentionally for the Holy Spirit to dwell inside of you, because one of the fruits of the Spirit is joy, and so if we have the Holy Spirit in us, that's just going to be a natural like outcome from having the Holy Spirit. And just being intentional, like every day, just even if you don't feel it, like even if you don't like maybe like crazy things are going on in your life and all this kind of stuff, but just praying like that through it all, through whatever season you're going through, that God would give you joy, and that he would give you his joy, and that he would make it complete in your life.
Yeah. That's awesome. There's the thing that I would add, and it is just kind of yes-anding what you've just said, is praying for God to help you identify help you figure out what really sets your heart on fire. Like if you haven't, absolutely, what makes you passionate. If you haven't been able to identify that yet, praying for that. I remember in high school was when the song, I think it's "Give Me Your Eyes" by Brandon Heath. I used to listen to that on repeat, and I remember actually in high school, actually just turning that song into a prayer, basically, because that really, I mean, that song is a prayer on its own, but I turned it into kind of my own personal prayer of, give me your heart for the brokenhearted, give me your eyes so I can see those that are hurting around me, and I mean, that's not the actual lyric, but that's the general tone of that.
Yeah.
And looking back on the last, 10, 11 years of my life since I heard that song, I can actually see how God has answered that prayer. And the same thing can happen if you're praying for God to show you what really sets your heart on fire, what really gets you motivated and fired up. Then the easy thing to do is look back and find out what are the times that you felt the most passionate about. And another thing too, another way to identify that is ask what got you the angriest. Because if you're able to identify what got you the angriest, it means that something, a boundary or a space in your life was violated to the point that you were angry about it. So it's whatever the opposite is of that, right? So, for example, Jesus got angry and flipped tables and grabbed a bullwhip.
Yeah, when people were stepping on his dad's house and stuff.
Yeah, on his dad's house, and abusing and manipulating his creation and his beloved people. Jesus is passionate about people. And what brings God joy is his creation. And so when he sees that being trampled on or hurt, that's when he steps in, and that's when he gets angry, right? Yeah. So that's kind of that a biblical reference for that. But yeah, what has made you angry in the last 5 years, 2 years, 10 years? What has made you consistently angry every time you've seen it? Has it been a specific kind of news article or like, thing in the news happening, or, then understanding then what the corollary of that is, or what the opposite of that is. Like, that's huge. So yeah, I think we've offered up some really cool and really good practical advice here, and I want to thank you both for sharing from your own experiences, and I want to encourage you in your own journeys of joy and happiness, and I hope you're able to continue kind of seeking those opportunities to serve and seeking those opportunities to bring joy to people's lives. And this has been a fun conversation, so thank you both. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to Echo and for being on this journey with us. If you're watching on YouTube, we hope that you'll leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcatching app that you like the most, we hope that you'll hit that subscribe button, that you'll leave a review, and that you'll engage with us. And also, for more content from Project Refresh that's like Echo and some of the other shows that we host, then head on over to theprojectrefresh.org. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world to us, and we'll see you next week.
This episode of the Echo Podcast is sponsored by Southern Adventist University.